Hey folks, Sean here with Bone Daddy Blade Works, back again for another exciting installment of Minimalist Monday. As you can clearly see from this display in front of me, today we're going to be looking at the blades and knives that I like to include with my pack kit, and I'm going to go over each and explain why I carry them. First and foremost, obviously, is the axis. As the name was already said, or as the name suggests rather, Bone Daddy Blade Works, we're a knife company. I love knives, I carry knives. I perhaps maybe own entirely too many knives, some people would say. But that being said, the first knife that gets included with my backpack kit is, of course, the Axis. I've put a lot of miles on this guy right here. You can see it still looks like it's basically new. And this thing is just an absolute monster. Incredibly functional, of course, with all the finger holes. I have a lot of different grips, so I can use this for real fine work and really choke up on it and use that sharpened point up there. And, of course, use it as a hand axe. You guys have probably already seen all these videos, and of course it can also then be hafted. So the Axis pretty easily covers most of my bases here around camp. I'd say 90-95% of tasks probably I can take care of with just this one tool. So of course this is my primary go-to. It will always be in my pack, and of course point of Minimalist Monday is also to set up my wife's pack, and so she too will undoubtedly be carrying one of these. Beyond that, I do also like to carry some other smaller blades. I really have been impressed with the Spyderco Laplander. This tool chops like nobody's business, or I should say saws like nobody's business. Don't want to do a lot of chopping with it anyways. But it's very compact, very light, easy to stick in a bag, and a really good saw is it's an awesome tool to have. There's just certain things a saw can do that a knife is never really going to do for you. So I do like to include this in a pack. I'm not sure if this would go in mine or my wife's pack. I'd probably, just because it's such a simple and easy use of tool, I'd probably let her carry this one along with the Axis, so that she's really got her bases covered well. So my everyday carry knife is the Spyderco Tenacious, and I absolutely love this knife. I've been carrying this for a couple of years now, and this is by far and away my favorite EDC pocket carry knife. That being said, this is not a knife I would actually take into the bush with me for a couple different reasons. Primarily, it simply isn't my ideal steel for outdoor uses. This is the 8CR13 MOV, which for general daily life is a perfect steel. It works really, really well, is easy to maintain, and of course without the serrations, it's very easy to sharpen and take care of. In the bush though, when you don't really have access to cleaning supplies necessarily, or it's not easy to keep your tools clean all the time or dry, I just don't know if I would trust that steel long term. And so with that in mind, this isn't one that I would carry, but I had to at least throw it in the lineup because I love this knife so much. Also really love the locking mechanism. That liner lock makes it incredibly easy to use. It's really solid. Sounds good when it opens. So I just love this knife. That being said though, before I started carrying this, what my general go-to was the Spyderco Pacific Salt. And for anybody that's ever carried one of the Spydercos that has the H1 Salt, you know it's just like the best steel that's ever been made. I mean, this stuff is fantastic. It doesn't necessarily hold an edge the best, but that being said, when you have a good straight knife like this, it doesn't have to be all that sharp, and it will still cut like nobody's business. So for the longest time, I carried this knife, and I've used this a whole lot, and a lot of my experience actually took place around the ocean, so saltwater conditions was primarily where I was using my knives, and of course the H1 was specifically designed for exactly that type of use. It's true to form. It has not rusted on me, and I've abused these knives pretty hard, and they've always worked really well. But the reason I no longer carry this knife is splitting lobster tails. I actually did find that back lock, there was some certain occasions where I was really pushing hard and trying to cut through really hard material and saw through it, and that back lock actually depressed, and I did have this knife close on my hand. Now luckily there was enough material there that it didn't actually bite down on my fingers, but you can see how that would be a real big problem, especially if you're in the bush. Safety is everything, and if you can't necessarily trust your locking mechanism to hold true, especially when you're using a knife hard, then that's a bit iffy. So I still really do like this knife, and I would still certainly take this if I was looking for a dive knife to stick in my bathing suit when I'm free diving or spearfishing. But that being said, it is something that you really got to be cognizant of, because if you squeeze too hard or you don't have your hand in the right place, that lock can fail you. So moving on from that, because of that failure, when I was starting to assess other knives that I was going to include in my kit, it made me start thinking about the locking mechanism specifically. And so now I have moved on from the Pacific Salt to the Spyderco Caribbean, and this is in the LC200N steel, which is also just, like the H1. It's unbeatable. It's a rust-proof steel. It will last a lifetime. And of course, with these serrations, even if it does start to dull up a bit, it will keep cutting for a very, 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 very long time. So this is a really, really, really tough knife. Very high vis, as you can see, with that high contrast, the scales on there. But all of them, of course, are pretty high vis here, just because I tend to like the bright colors. And this knife, unlike that one, has a liner locker that's on the back right there, which is incredibly strong. I believe Spyderco is calling that their compression lock. And as you can see, unlike the Tenacious, which has it on the inside of the blade there, it's actually along the back of these knives, which I'm a little bit more accustomed to it on the inside there. So I'm still getting a little bit used to it on the back. But that being said, it's an incredibly strong locking mechanism, definitely very trustworthy. And there's absolutely no way that I am going to depress it while trying to cut and saw and split lobster tails, whatever I'm going to be using my knife for. So I like this as a backup knife, in addition to the Axis, which I already shared, because there's just certain things that a little handheld knife like this with the serrations are going to do, and certain places that you can get into with that fine point that you can't with something as big and broad as the Axis. Additional backup, because I like redundancies with my blades in my pack, would be the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 in the M390 steel. Another super steel. This is a really, really tough steel, incredibly strong, holds a great edge, very, very corrosion resistant. It's just another monster knife right here. So between those two, you see I got two great edges for different uses, but both of which are just incredible steels that will really weather well outdoors, especially if you're not in a position to take care of your knives on a very regular basis, or very easily anyways. And then, rounding it all off, I of course need to carry a sharpener, because for these blades that have those straight edge, that's one of the problems with that edge, is you can certainly go through a straight edge a lot quicker than a straight edge, but you can also sharpen it a lot easier. So I keep this in my pack, nice double-sided diamond ceramic sharpener, so the Axis and my other straight edges can maintain a good edge. So now that I've shared the knives that I like to use and regularly carry, I'm thinking in terms of expanding my setup so that my wife is well set up as well. She, of course, will be carrying another Axis, so we'll have two Axes between the two of us. Maybe not the lightest setup that you could have, but certainly probably the most versatile setup that you can have. And then, of course, I will be carrying at least two pack-away knives, something that's easy for me to carry in my pocket or attach to a pack. And I'll probably set her up with something like that. Right now, she has a small Spyderco that has a backlock like the Spyderco Pacific Salt here. And it is in, I believe it's the 8CR3 MOV as well. So it's not really an appropriate knife for the bush. So I'm going to be looking to get her something, a setup like this, maybe something a little bit smaller that might be a little bit more comfortable to her hand. But in essence, with this setup right here, there's really nothing that I can't do in the bush. So now that you've seen what I carry, I'd like to hear your thoughts and see if you have any other opinions or any other knives that you might be carrying that I've missed here, or disagree entirely even with what I've chosen here. Please feel free to reach out and tell us what you think. Thank you so much for watching. And please check us out next week, where I'm going to be going over my fire setup, all the tools that I have and pieces of kit that I have for helping me start a fire. Thanks for watching. You take care.